In the opening chapters of Mark's gospel, we find that Jesus is in control of what's going on. He's been going through the countryside. He's been healing diseases. He's been helping people to do all kinds of things that they thought was beyond their capabilities or their abilities to do. He's done silly things like eat with sinners. He's got 12 disciples that he's trying to teach what it is to be a follower of his, and quite frankly, they seem to be clueless. Bless you. And then we come to this point about halfway into the gospel, and we find that Jesus has taken his disciples and he's gone to It's gone up to Caesarea Philippi, which is up in the northern part of Israel. It's up near the base of Mount Hermon. And in that particular location, there are a lot of different shrines and temples that were built there to worship all of the fertility gods that were so important in that generation. And while he's there, he asked his disciples, who do the people say that I am? And some of them said, well, you're a prophet and other things. And then he brings it home a little bit closer and he says, but who do you say that I am? And Peter says, you are the Christ, the Messiah. And that's when he gets the name of Peter, and Jesus says, upon this rock, I shall build my church. And then he begins to tell them about the things he's going to endure when he gets to Jerusalem, how he's going to be taken captivity, he's going to be brought up before the religious leaders and tried and convicted. That he's going to die. And 3 days after that, he would rise from the dead. Dear old Peter didn't want to hear this. And so he takes Jesus and, aside, and he rebukes Jesus. I'm going to use some holy imagination here because we don't have Peter's words, but he may have said a few things like, come on, Jesus, stop talking like that. Is that any way for the Messiah to talk? You have this Jesus. You know better than to say such things to us. We're with you all the way. We'll show those who are against you that you are the boss. Get your act together, Jesus. You of all people shouldn't be talking this way. You can handle those religious bullies. Well, no doubt Peter was caught off guard when Jesus returns the favor. But instead of taking Peter aside, he turns and he looks at his disciple and he rebukes Peter by saying, "Get behind me, Satan. For you're setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." I suspect that Peter was shocked, to say the least. He didn't expect to hear that coming from Jesus. He just called me Satan? Peter's problem is that he was looking at the world from the world's point of view. Jesus is always looking at the world from God's point of view. And where Peter was caught up in the idea of the one with the most marbles wins, Jesus was saying to them, it's the ones who are faithful to God who win, even if they don't have a single marble to show for it. Sometimes you may have heard, or at some time you may have heard this statement that somebody is so heavenly minded that they're of no earthly good. Well, for Peter, it was the exact opposite. He was so earthly minded that he was of no heavenly good. He was looking for Jesus to establish his kingdom here and now, to put together the powers of the Messiah and to take over and to set up God's kingdom in such a way that nobody would deny it. And so he was, just not willing to let Jesus be Jesus. But Jesus had come here for a purpose. And he understood that purpose. He came here so that, humanity could be saved from the power of sin and death. He came to give himself fully and completely to that particular direction. And he was willing to pay the price no matter what the price might be. And even if it included going to Jerusalem to be spat upon, kicked about, beat, whipped, even crucified, in order to bring the possibility of salvation to all of God's humanity, then Jesus was willing to do that. He wanted his disciples to know and to understand that it was not an easy journey that they were on. That there was going to be pain and suffering that would be involved in that process. And that if we remain faithful, we're going to experience that pain and suffering within our hearts and our minds and our spirits in a variety of different ways on different occasions. Yet if we remain faithful, we do win. We receive the victory that Christ has came to purchase for us. We have the opportunity to share that good news with others. We have the opportunity to make disciples for Jesus Christ, for the transformation of the world with love and care. But if we don't do it, who will? If we don't do it, who will? If we don't do it, who will? Jesus says those who want to be my followers have to deny themselves, take up the cross, and follow him. In this world that doesn't want to deny itself of anything but wants to grab onto everything, that's no easy task. The season of Lent brings us to the point where we look at the possibility, what is it that are we going to give up for Lent? And I do believe Christ calls us to more than giving up chocolate. As we make this journey with Jesus, then, through this season of Lent, we are confronted with the reality that Jesus has called us to much more. He also understands that if we are faithful in what He calls us to do, that there will be a reward, but that's not the reason for doing it. The reason for doing it is so that others might find somehow within their life the experience of God's redeeming love that captures their hearts and minds and spirits in such a way that they too become His disciples. And disciples blow it from time to time. But God's love remains steadfast for us. He continues to call us back to that relationship. He calls us back to living with Jesus in the reality of this day. And to know the abundance of His love and His care and the majesty of the grace that He's offered to us and the power that brings into our lives to go through things that we don't choose to go through, to experience things we don't want to experience, to be part of things that sometimes just baffle us. That's what it means to deny, to take up, and to follow. So as we continue this journey through the season of Lent towards the cross and the crucifixion and towards the power of the resurrection, may we do so with the sure and certain hope within us that God is capable of enabling us to do things that are beyond our own strength and our own power. If we will deny ourselves, take up the cross, and follow Him. Ain't going to be easy, but it will be worth it. That's where we experience the power of forgiveness and resurrection. So be it. Amen.